Hey everyone, this is Mr. Loebel coming at you with some notes on the Byzantine Empire. This is my first time doing kind of recorded notes for the class, so hopefully it goes well, you can get what you need, and hopefully I don't bore you too much and I can keep you kind of focused on learning a little bit more about history. I know some of you may be tempted just to jump through and get the items that you need for the notes page that you should have found on Canvas. You know my notes go a bit more in depth than that. I highly encourage you just give me a few minutes of your day, even have this playing in the background while you're doing something else to multitask so you can learn a little bit more and be ready. Now, moving forward, we are going to be jumping into the Middle Ages soon. Castles, knights, princesses, the Black Plague, things like that. And before we get there, we're going to talk about this place called the Byzantine Empire. So we're kind of in a unit 2.5, like a middle ground that we're going to spend about a week on before we jump into the Middle Ages. So as we dive in, I did make a quick timeline kind of showing some of the major events that we covered, showing you where we're at in history so you have a good visual piece for it, okay? So in 753 BC, we have ancient Rome being founded, the whole story of Romulus and Remus, their first society. Jumping forward 53 years, we have Greek civilization forming. So we see there's overlap between Rome and Greece. And then moving further along than that, from 264 to 146 BC, we have the Punic Wars. You see, I have the image there of Hannibal leading his army of elephants. And then right at the end of the Punic Wars, we have Rome conquering Greece. So here we see that Greece is probably involved in the wars. They teamed up with Carthage. They wanted to try and bring Rome down. Didn't go so well for them. Further along on 31 BC, Augustus becoming our first emperor. Remember, he was Caesar's nephew's son, being adopted by Caesar, and he steps forward after Caesar is killed, and he becomes the first king above everyone else. Moving further along in 284 AD, one of the Roman emperors, Diocletian, he felt like Rome, the empire, was way too big for one person to manage and be king of. So he divided the empire into an eastern and western section, and he gave one half to one of his trusted generals and elevated that general to emperor. So then Rome started to have two emperors, a western emperor and an eastern emperor. And that's a big piece on what we're going to look at today. And then moving forward to 476 AD, when we did the fall of Rome, we were actually just looking at Western Rome, that western half of the empire. And today we're going to kind of see why, and you're going to learn why I kind of held off on telling you that beforehand. All right, so we have those pieces. We're going to move forward to, what was the Byzantine Empire? What did that look like? So here I have a quick map, a little blurry, I apologize. So as Rome was split down the middle, earlier on, before Rome was split, Constantine, our emperor who legalized Christianity, he actually moved the capital city from Rome and he moved it to this place called Byzantium. He wanted to have a more eastern location. More trade was happening in that area, and he felt like he could delegate there better. And he renovated the city, he rebuilt it, and he felt that the best way to remember the name of his capital city was to name it after himself. So he named it Constantinople. And here we have it over here as the new capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. When Rome was split, the Western Romans adopted Rome as their capital. So here we see where the split happens and where these two empires are. All right, moving forward. When we looked at the fall of Rome, that assignment, we had this map here showing all of these different barbarians that were raiding Western Rome. And these are what really caused the fall of Rome. And I have this map because we're going to look at it a few times throughout our world history unit. Notice down here we have the names of the different barbarian tribes. There are quite a few of them. Vandals, you might recognize the word vandal there, the word vandalism, meaning to like loot and destroy when we vandalize today. Hopefully we're not doing it, but it means, defacing, destroying property. The Vandal barbarians were the ones who made that term popular. We have the Angles, the Saxons, Franks, the Goths. All of these tribes are moving in. They're going to take down Western Rome and they're going to start to settle in here. And we're going to see how that begins to shape Europe as we know it today. So, Constantinople. Let's talk about this capital of the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, as it were, and discuss why it was such a good place for people to live, why it was a strategic city, right? So, it was the city of Byzantium, rebuilt by the Romans, and it was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, also known as the Eastern Roman Empire. I'll use those terms interchangeably as we go through this. It had amazing geography. Like with Greece and Rome, Constantinople was located on a peninsula, so this was very strategic for protection. You see there are also mountains and hills to the north. It was very hard for enemies to invade, and the waterways provided excellent harbors for trade and commerce. So it was easily protected, great harbor. It was a trade crossroads. Not only were the waterways good trade crossroads, but Constantinople had many roads going through it. It kind of served as a good trade city for members of the Roman Empire to transport goods out of what we know as Europe through the Middle East and into parts of Asia. A lot of trades happening with silk, spices, tea, things of that nature that people wanted. So moving forward, we're really just going to talk about one ruler and his reign in the Byzantine Empire, and it was this guy named Justinian. He was the Byzantine emperor from 527 to 565. So he was around for some time, 527 to 565 AD. So he came around almost 100 years after the Western Roman Empire fell. Notice he served almost 40 years as an emperor. That's a long time considering the reigns we saw with the Western Roman emperors. Their reigns were much shorter, anywhere from 5 to 10 years. So this kind of tells us that, hey, he did a good job. The people liked him. They weren't looking to murder him or betray him or to force him to commit suicide. Justinian was a very progressive guy. He was very intelligent. He was an idealist. He wanted to bring back the glory of Rome. He wanted to conquer the Roman territories that had been taken by the barbarians, and he did this. He took this from those Germanic tribes. So the Vandals, the Goths, the Anglo-Saxons, we call them Germanic tribes. You should be familiar with the word German in there. Germany was founded by some of these Germanic tribes and other nations in England, such as France, not in England, but in Europe, sorry, but states, countries, ooh, it's a day. Countries such as France, England, and Denmark were all kind of settled in by these Germanic tribes, which is why we use that phrase. And we'll discuss more about them as we move into the Middle Ages. This is kind of cut off a little bit, unfortunately, but Justinian held absolute power over the church and state. So we discussed in the Roman unit how Christianity began to grow. It was very popular. Then it was made legal, and eventually the Christian Church, the Catholic Church, became the domineering religion in all of Rome, both sides. And on the eastern side, the emperor was considered the one in charge of everything. And we're going to see that the Western Romans didn't necessarily do that. So this was Justinian, and as he wanted to make a lot of changes and do good for his country, he also focused on law. And he formed this thing called Justinian's Code. This was a body of civil laws. It was a reference guide for law. When we say civil laws, we kind of mean local area laws, like laws within your town, your county, even your state, not necessarily at a federal or government level. So if you've committed vandalism, you've had a hit and run, there's been a domestic dispute at your house, that would all be dealt in civil court. If somebody's stolen from you and you're filing it, that's all held in civil court. And Justinian worked on reforming this from the ancient Roman law. This was huge because a lot of what Justinian codified and wrote became the basis of European law. And as you've learned, the early colonists of the US were Europeans, and a lot of the ideas they had about law, a lot of the ideas they had about civil courts and how a trial should work for a citizen came from European law, which was in turn influenced by Justinian's code, which is why we look back at it and we view it as such a timely piece in history. He broke down the law into four parts. The first part was his code, which was a summary of laws that he considered useful. He was able to narrow it down to 5,000. So for him, 5,000 was a small number compared to how many Roman laws there were. The Senate had consistently been passing laws both publicly and in private, and they typically moved forward with laws. They didn't do a lot of revisions and removal of old laws. There are some pretty crazy ones out there. For example, one old Roman law stated that if you were struck by lightning, nobody could take your body and bury it because the belief was that Jupiter, the god of lightning, struck you down because you had angered him in some way. So that was your fault and you were considered unholy. Justinian got rid of some of these laws. He kind of tried to narrow it down to the most important laws needed for society. He codified the laws, meaning he kind of put them all together in an encyclopedia, in a section of books. He revised them and organized them by category so it was easier for people to learn and follow the law. He created a digest, which was a summary not necessarily on laws, but on the greatest thinkers of Roman law. He kind of put all of their ideas and thoughts into a concentrated volume of work so that new lawmakers and emperors could kind of read this and have this guide their decisions for making law so that things were consistent. And he finally created an institute, which was a textbook for law students to study. We start to see students of law and lawyers during the time of the ancient Roman Empire. Your typical citizens could not defend themselves in court unless they knew the law. And if you're trying to learn 5,000 laws, you got to read it. And quite a few citizens were illiterate. So this was a good way to bridge that. We have this thing called the Novelle, which was new law, and this was just a collection of laws made after 534 CE, after Justinian kind of established his code. So Justinian was trying to do a lot of positive changes for Rome. He wanted to leave a legacy that people could build off of, and this was really good. Now, as great as he was, we can't talk about Justinian without talking about his wife, Empress Theodora, and she was, quite frankly, the strongest woman the Byzantine Empire ever had in their 1,000 years plus of reign. She's the wife to Emperor Justinian. However, she was not a part of the aristocracy. She was not royalty. She was actually raised, she was very poor. Her father was a bear trainer at the Colosseum, and her mother, we believe, was a wool spinner. And while some texts say that she was an actress, really she was a woman of the night. She was a prostitute. And Justinian met her and they became involved and he fell in love with her. And for a while she was his mistress, so kind of like his unofficial girlfriend per se, but he wanted to marry her. However, there were laws against members of the aristocracy marrying someone like Theodora, and on top of that, no members of the public really wanted him marrying her because uh, in ancient times, it was okay to be involved with women like this on the side and to even have a few mistresses if you were a member of royalty, but to publicly marry them and join them in that religious union that was considered unholy or wrong, Justinian didn't care. He changed the laws since he's the emperor and he married her anyways. And for all intents and purposes, Theodore rose to the occasion. She was very intelligent. She was a well read woman, and she wanted to work with Justinian to bring change to the empire. And he was all for it. While Justinian was away on military campaigns, Theodora would meet with foreign ambassadors who came to the state. She would make deals with them, she would pass laws. Justinian gave her almost total authority that he would have while he was gone, and he gave that to Theodora and allowed her to co-rule with him. And this was kind of unprecedented during a time when, you still had laws where if a woman left the house without her husband's permission, she could be beaten by the husband legally or punished, right? And here you have this woman from a very sketchy background becoming the strongest person in the empire aside from the emperor and doing all these great things. This was unprecedented, but it was very beneficial for the Byzantines. Theodora worked hard. She tried to make better rights for women. She made it to where women could inherit and own their own property. So now women are not necessarily dependent on finding a husband who can take property from their family and provide for them. This was a great piece of security for women and it gave them just a bit more power. And it's just the first step in that long journey Western society had on moving towards equality for women, which is awesome. So as things progressed, Justinian and his wife left a really powerful legacy, and after Justinian passed away and his reign is gone, he helped set up a new golden age for Constantinople. They heavily fortified the capital. As you can see here, we have huge towering walls going all around the city to protect it. This plus the ocean and the mountains made it almost impossible for an invading army to get in. Justinian realized, and many emperors after him realized, that no matter how big your army, no matter how powerful your senate, you need to keep the people happy. You need to provide for the welfare of the people, or things go south pretty quick. So a lot of these emperors focused on public works, aqueducts, which allowed running water to flow through the city for different services, baths, courts, schools, hospitals, doing everything they could to kind of benefit the lives of the public people. And then there was the creation of the Hagia Sophia, it's known for its particular onion dome, and it was considered the most splendid church in all of the Christian world. It was a huge monument to Christianity. So over here in the top right, we have the Hagia Sophia, and look at all these people we have congregating over its creation. By a church service, you see a cross here. Christianity was huge in the Eastern Roman Empire. There's Catholicism at the time. As we talk about things, I'll interchange Christianity and the word Catholicism pretty easily. It's important to remember that Catholics are Christians. They have some different practices than non-Catholics, but Catholics and Christians both have the same fundamental beliefs in Jesus Christ, and it's important to know they're not two different religions. So here we have the Hagia Sophia again, but notice that if we go back to this first picture, we have all of these Eastern Roman people out here, Eastern Roman statues. There's the Hagia Sophia. Then over here, it looks different, right? There's the spire here, more spires known as minarets popping up, and more spires on the dome buildings. And the people here have changed. They're not necessarily Eastern Roman. They have a lot of flowy, bright colored clothes. Notice the turbans on the heads. We're going to discuss this in a bit. Here we have some pictures of the inside of the Hagia Sophia. It's been renovated somewhat, but they try to keep it preserved in its original architecture. Notice here, this was a church built for the Christians, but look at these circular panels here. That is not Latin. That's not English. That's Arabic, and we're going to discuss why that is in a bit. All right, so over here in this pink, we have Justinian's empire prior to his reign, and then here all the orange is what he was able to reconquer during his time before he died. So we see he tried to capture a lot of old Rome and the Western Empire. He didn't retake all of it. We have the kingdom of the Franks here and the Visigoths. We'll come back to them later. But he did manage to get quite a bit of territory back, and the Eastern Roman Empire is going to hold on to it for a while, and we'll discover what's going on with that later. All right. So as we talk East and West, Byzantine versus the Western Roman Empire, a big reason why they had culturally different identities was this thing called the Great Schism. Schism's a split, and here we see the church being split by two members of religious orders. These were differences in the Christian church, and the Eastern and Western Romans could not agree on who the church leader should be, the prime location of the Catholic Church, what language they should be teaching in, and how priests should live their lives, and the use of these things called icons, which we're going to look at in a moment. All this resulted in the Great Schism, which was a permanent church split. The Eastern and Western Catholic churches split from each other and formed their own individual churches in 1054. We have the Eastern Orthodox Church in the Byzantine Empire, and we have the Roman Catholic Church in the West. Many Catholics in the U.S. derive their Catholicism from Western Europe, so typically they are Roman Catholic, and we'll see some of the practices they have and where those came from. And remember, this church leader piece is big. Earlier on, we noted Justinian was the head of church and state. The emperor was in the Byzantine Empire. But as Christianity became bigger in Western Rome and the church gained more power, the head of the church in Western Rome was not the emperor, it was the pope. And we'll see kind of a power play there. All right, so religious icons, what are they? These are images used by Christians for devotion. So when Christians are worshiping or praying, these might be images, statues, paintings that Christians are praying to or toward. And the thought was this could help the believer connect the image to the icon and give a more spiritual connection. So typically in Catholic churches, you hear the Catholics talking about the saints. One of the students mentioned, I thought that Catholics, prayed to Saint Mary or prayed to another saint in the church, and sometimes that's used as a way for Catholics to have that spiritual experience. But the Eastern Romans did not like this, and so here in the East, oh, this is incorrect. I am sorry for this. This should say that those in the West supported icons, but the emperor banned idols in the East. This is backwards, and I apologize for that. So the West supported icons, the East did not. The emperor banned idol worship in the East, the emperor. And here, this is Emperor Leo who banned the idol worship in the East. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. Here we have some Byzantine icons, picture of Jesus, and then here we have Mary and baby Jesus as well. So big reason why the Byzantines did not like icons is for them, remember Christianity is monotheistic, and they were worried that by praying to pictures of people and by praying to especially people who weren't Jesus or God, that was like idol worship, like putting up these people as gods, and that made Christianity polytheistic. And so they thought that was heresy. It was against Christianity, so they were against it. The Western Romans did not see themselves as worshiping these icons or pictures, but it was just a spiritual connection for them, for their religion. And they were more open to worshiping that way because many of the Western Romans before had been polytheistic. They were used to, the different gods like Jupiter, Pluto, and Mars, and even seeing the emperor as a god. So for them, it was not a difficult transition over to icons in Christianity. Here we have just some images of Russian icons and how they were used in the Eastern Orthodox Church. So here we have a breakdown. It should be on your notes as well. The Roman Catholic versus the Eastern Orthodox Church, comparing them. Similarities. They both believe in the gospel of Jesus in the Bible. Again, this is a Christian foundation. Catholics are Christian. They both believe in baptism. They both have priests and bishops, and they both are looking to convert people to Christianity. Here are the key differences. The Roman Catholic Church only conducted services in Latin, so if you converted to Catholicism, you were expected to learn Latin. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, they used Greek. They used the local languages, depending on who the priest was in the area and what the people spoke. One of the biggest pieces, and we're going to discuss this a lot in the Middle Ages, in the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope has authority over all other bishops. The Pope is the head of the church. The Pope has the final say. The Pope was believed to be the mouthpiece from God to the people. Here we have this guy called a patriarch and other bishops as head of the church as a group. So you have more of an oligarchy structure here, a group structure, but here we have one person with all authority over everyone else. The Pope also claimed to have authority over all kings and emperors. So the Pope says, I speak from God, therefore, I'm God's mouthpiece. And for the Christians, that was a big deal. That did place the Pope over kings and emperors. However, in the Eastern Orthodox Church, the emperor put themselves over the church, over the patriarch and other bishops in the empire. The emperor had the final say here. Whereas over here, we have the Pope claiming authority over kings and emperors, which makes a power play between the Pope and the kings and emperors. Priests cannot marry in the Roman Catholic faith. The priests are not allowed to marry, and that still holds true to this day. In the Eastern Orthodox, they are allowed to marry. And in the Roman Catholic Church, they look down on divorce. It's not really permitted for any reason. I don't know if this has changed in modern day, but in Eastern Orthodox, they were a bit more tolerant of divorce under certain conditions. All right, moving forward. Here we have a map showing the Roman Catholic Church, the orange, the Orthodox Church over here in the blue, and notice they kind of split down the middle between the Eastern and Western Roman empires. Even over here, Venice, the Papal States with the Pope, it's primarily Roman Catholic. And look at all of Europe. Over here is England, the Holy Roman Empire here. We're going to see Germany and Germany form out of this. We have France over here, all Roman Catholic. So when we look at the Middle Ages and these kingdoms, they're all underneath the Roman Catholic, the idea of the Pope. All right, here we have a breakdown. Hard to read, I apologize. We have Christianity up here, Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox in 1054. Later on, we're going to see a breakdown from the Roman Catholics and Protestants. For those of you that are Baptist, Lutheran, Calvinist, any of those types of Christianity, you typically fall under the Protestant area here, and we're going to look at why this is later on. All right, so the Byzantines, they don't last forever, unfortunately. Around 600 AD, a downfall is going to last that's going to take about 600 years for the Byzantines to eventually fall. Barbarian invasions, yet again. However, it's not just going to be barbarians. The Arab Muslims from the south are going to be an organized, large army that are going to contest the Byzantines for control of their city. And then eventually, we're going to talk about this thing called the Crusades, which was Western Europe's attempt to retake the Christian Holy Lands, and that's going to affect Constantinople as well. Here we have a picture of the Arab Muslim armies coming in and sacking Constantinople. And here's a picture of the Eastern Mediterranean almost around the time that it falls and turns into what's called the Ottoman Empire, which was a big player in World War I, if you remember that. All right, so the empire falling, let's look at some other key factors. Constantinople itself was sacked or taken over multiple times. The Fourth Crusade, Western Europe's attempt to retake the Holy Lands. So actual Europeans came in and took the city in 1204. And then about 250 years later, the Ottoman Empire, which was a Muslim army led by the 21-year-old Sultan Mehmed II, laid siege to the city. And after 7 weeks, the Ottomans are able to retake the city. The Ottoman Turks had a new weapon with them. No longer were the walls of Constantinople enough because the Ottoman Turks had these big cannons called bombards. They had Turkish janissaries. They had gunpowder. They were able to break down the walls, and Constantinople's greatest defense from a land invasion was now useless. After the Turks take it over, they renamed the city Istanbul, which is the name for it today, and Constantinople, Istanbul, goes from being a culturally Christian Catholic city to a Muslim Arab city. That's why the Hagia Sophia had the spires, the minarets, and Arabic writings on the inside. It is no longer considered a Christian temple. It is now a mosque, which is a temple for the religion Islam that Muslims follow. All right, here we just have a photo of the Muslims coming in and taking the place. Now, even though Byzantium fell and Western Europe lived on under the Roman Catholic Church, the Byzantine Empire secured a lot of powerful culture and foundational history. Sorry about that pause. Uh, the Byzantine Empire had a lot of foundational and cultural history for us, things that we are using today in our ideals and art that we have. So let's look at some of those things. The Greek and Roman traditions were preserved after Western Rome falls. There's a blending of Roman culture and the barbarian culture, which forms these new identities. But in the Byzantine area, they really held on to some of the older Greek and Roman traditions. They held on to the language, libraries, Justinian's code. A lot of these books and texts are able to leave the city when the Ottomans take it. Scholars and well-educated individuals are fleeing Constantinople, they're fleeing the Byzantine Empire, and they're bringing with them all of this art, all of these codes, all of these histories that are helping to start this huge flourishing of art and culture called the Renaissance in Italy. So it was good that Byzantium held on to kind of a society and structured culture while Western Europe was reforming and restructuring itself. We have the onion domes, which was just a new type of architecture influenced by the Ottoman Turks along with Byzantium art. And I just have a picture here kind of showcasing that. We see these a lot in the Eastern European areas. Here's St. Basil's Cathedral located in Russia, a Russian Orthodox cathedral. Very colorful, very vibrant. I would argue it looks like it should be out of like a Candyland game or from Wreck-It Ralph, right? But it looks fantastic. All right, final postscript. Those Ottoman Turks that overtook the uh, Byzantine Empire that overtook Constantinople. Later on, they're going to move further along to an area around Romania, and they're going to run into this guy here. This guy's name is Vlad Tepes, and he is the leader of a small kingdom called Wallachia. And the Ottomans, before invading, they need to go through Tepes's area because it's a mountain pass. They need to go past it to continue invading Europe. And they send some ambassadors to go talk to him. When the ambassadors meet him, he demands they bow to him and take off their turbans, but they refuse to do so out of religious beliefs. So he nails the ambassadors' turbans to their heads and sends them back to Mehmed II. Mehmed II prepares this huge invasion, and he sends an advance force to go take over Vlad's kingdom. In response, Vlad takes all of the prisoners he has in his dungeons and some of the people who have committed crimes against him, and he impales them on spikes alive. And he sets them in front of the fields in front of his kingdom. So when Mehmed, the armies, the Ottoman Empire's armies show up, they see Vlad's own people impaled on spikes on the field. And legend has it that the Ottomans saw this and they became so scared of a guy willing to do this to his own people that they backed off out of fear. And this is where he got the title Vlad the Impaler. And later on, the very popular story about Dracula was based off of this guy. Unfortunately, Mehmed bribes Vlad's brother to betray him, and he does so, and Vlad and his armies are destroyed. And that's all there is to that. But hey, Dracula, he's a part of this story in a way. All right, guys, that's it for the notes. Hopefully, you're able to follow along. Hopefully, you're able to learn some stuff. And thank you for listening if you did. I hope to have all of you back soon, and I will keep you updated on anything else you need to do for class. Take it easy.